Ichigo Awakens by Teloch. Chapter 1, Prologue, Part 1. Prologue, Part 1. When he awakened, it felt like any other day. The heavy rain still persisted. It hadn't changed in the past week. There was nothing remarkable, nothing important. Overall, a very forgettable day. One that some would rather forget altogether. Yet the city did not stop. The city would not stop. The streets were constantly busy with the hustle and bustle of people going to and from the various places in the city. The sun managed to shine through the thinning clouds, letting the morning rays rouse the people where busy parents and annoying siblings would pick up the sleepy stragglers from their restful respite from their everyday lives. Many would feel rather dismayed, reflecting the feel of the weather, yet one gentle soul always managed to make everything seem brighter. The Kurosaki household. Masaki Kurosaki, matriarch of the Kurosaki household and one of the few Quincy alive, was eating breakfast with her beloved family. Her 9-year-old son, Ichigo, was playing with his younger twin sisters, Karin and Yuzu, as was the way as children their age. Her husband, the former Shinigami captain, Ishin Shiba Kurosaki, joined in their festivities, making the mood all the more infectious. This is what she always desired. This is what made her content, a peaceful life and a joyous family. But deep down, she was wary of her own son. She will always love her child, but in the far reaches of the back of her mind, she was ever cautious. When he was born, she no longer felt that hollow that infected her years ago. She had her suspicions, but prayed she was wrong. Ichigo's inner world, an entire city, standing on its side, was bathed in a magnificent radiance, which was the utter opposite of the world outside. A middle-aged man in a black tattered overcoat, ever caught in a non-existent wind, was trying to enjoy the beautiful day, but there was something plaguing his mind, which he just couldn't push aside. A weird feeling, one that still connected him to the Quincy King. "You don't seem to be enjoying this as much as you usually do," spoke a warped voice. The man turned to see his lone companion in the empty world, a tall and lean man, white as bleached bones, wearing a mask as black as night, a skull with two parallel lines going down the mask, which was fixed in a constant feral grin. "Don't you like that? Don't you like that bright sunny days?" the pale man teased. "Have you grown tired of them, or is there something else? Some persistent nagging reason that's making you question your stance?" "There is nothing to question," the old man said, calm but firm. "He is safe. That is all that matters." "Yeah, for now. What about when that changes?" The same argument bubbled to the surface once again, whether to keep their charge innocent and ignorant for as long as they could by restricting his power, or expose his potential and make him prepare for anything. The old man wanted to keep Ichigo out of harm's way. The skull-faced figure wanted Ichigo to prepare, to keep him from fighting or make him the strongest fighter. They had fought over this time and time again. "I refuse to allow Ichigo into that world," the elder said. "He's too young." "And when he's older, what are you going to say? He's too gentle? Face it, I'm here and that kid will love fighting." The two glared at each other for a time. "We'll leave this matter to his mother." The older man sounded like he was trying to convince himself more than his other half. He knew that old tale was a distant prophecy, and today was one of the special days for that man's return. "You really think that bastard will let her live?" the pale man said. The elder froze in shock. He didn't think that the Zangpakto knew the prophecy of the Quincy King's return. He never spoke of it, even blocked it from their connection. So how did he know it? "Because we're still technically one being, dumbass." The Hollow was smarter than he gave it credit for. "He should be able to recognize Ichigo's potential," the Quincy half argued. "He wouldn't do anything that might harm him." "Please, when has he shown any form of kindness or care?" the Hollow/Samputo hybrid argued. "If it isn't a pure Quincy or useful to him, he'll kill it because of that taint." Being the instincts did have its perks, he recognized the threat and would be prepared for it. Unfortunately, he had to share this world with someone less than agreeable and wanted to hide Ichigo away. "Enough," the Quincy growled. "This isn't for us to decide," he said before disappearing, not wanting to continue this conversation, or giving himself reason to believe that he might be wrong. The sword spirit was left alone with his thoughts. A part of him was wishing that the Quincy hack was right, because if he wasn't, today was going to be terrible. Hours later, after Ichigo's karate class. The rain became heavy again, and the river banks and aqueducts swelled with the rushing water. The auburn-haired Quincy and her young child were making their way home in the heavy shower. He was such a sweet child. Ever since his father told him what his name meant, he tried so hard to get stronger, to protect her. He had so much potential, so much power, but he was still such a child. She didn't want him to start training. She didn't want him to end up in that world of struggle and bloodshed, fighting with his life on the line. He was a flashing bright beacon to those empty monsters, the hollows, the ones that would love nothing more than to devour him and all his reishi. She would do anything to protect her little boy, to keep him away from that horrid place. She felt her son's tiny hand slip out of her grasp. She saw him running towards a girl, a spirit. His was one of the clearest sights ever. He never was able to tell living from the dead. She began to chase him, to keep him from getting washed away into the current. That's when she felt it. A dark, oppressive hunger aimed right at her son. She turned to see a large hollow heading for her son. He was covered in wet, brown fur and a large mask, with what seemed to be a fishing lure sticking out of his head. She needed to hurry to protect her child. She skated on a flow of reishi to get between the disgusting creature and her son, gathering the energy to generate her spirit bow. Then she was surrounded in a flash of light. She felt her power being ripped out of her, leaving her defenseless. Her only thought, save him. Ichigo's inner world. That bastard! The hollow half yelled, somehow knowing this was going to happen. Masaki was made powerless and, in just a scant few seconds, would be dead. The Quincy half just stared, damning his own inaction that had led to this. Deep down he knew the hollow was right. Yaba would never allow Masaki to live anymore. With her dead, this world would flood. Ichigo would be defenseless. He tried to not care, concerning himself only with Ichigo. But if this happened, then Ichigo would suffer, most likely for years, blaming himself for this. He was a fool. Protecting Ichigo didn't mean keeping him hidden. He was weak and vulnerable now. Old man, the hollow yelled, it's now or never. Are we just going to let this happen, or are we going to do something? Save his mother and set the boy on the path of bloodshed, or leave him be and let him get consumed by sorrow. The Quincy half of Ichigo knew his decision. He just prayed he wouldn't regret it. Fine, he declared, letting his energy charge. Ichigo will walk a road of battle. The hollow grinned under his mask. Finally, Ichigo will be prepared for what was coming. Then by our name, his power, we shall protect him and his happiness. He charged his own power, his own energy. At once, they unleashed their combined energy, took control of Ichigo's body, and uttered one word. Everything around Ichigo was consumed in light. Zangetsu. End of Chapter 1. Ichigo Awakens by Teloch. Chapter 2, Prologue Part 2. Prologue Part 2, Answers and Teachers. Darkness. That all he could see around him, memories flashing like lightning all around him, all in that endless expanse of nothingness. He heard screams of terror and sickening crunches with each new image, each new nightmare, places he'd never been, people he's never met, all playing out in what was possibly for the final moments before whatever happened. In all this, he remembered fear, he felt terror, but most of all, he was hungry. He was hungry and was devouring these people with cold and calculated plans before indulging his hunger. That was until she appeared. He saw her, an adult woman, standing between him and a new morsel. In her hands was a glowing blue bow and an arrow notched and targeted for his skull, but then she was engulfed in the light and she staggered. Her threat was now diminished and he could feed. Then another flash came. A name was called out that he knew was spoken, but he did not hear it. The darkness returned and he heard only one thing: protect. Ichigo's inner world. He finally opened his eyes, freeing himself from that nightmare of death and hunger, and beheld the odd world around him. Buildings stretched out to the endless sky ahead, an entire world twisted on its axis. A part of him knew he should be scared, felt that he should be terrified, but he couldn't help but relax in a strange sense of familiarity in this place. The young hybrid child stared into the strange blue world in wonder and awe. Where Ichigo began. Where am I? Well, that's certainly $1 million question there, King. He heard a strange voice speak. Ichigo turned to see a tall figure, all white in some weird robes and a black skull mask on his face. Where are you? What is this place? What happened to your mommy? he said mockingly before swinging his arms out to gesture all around them. In short order, you're in your head. This is your inner world. And mommy, he got close to Ichigo and whispered in his ears, she's gone. The second those words registered in Ichigo's mind, it began to pour. Damn, Sagetsu thought to himself. The old man is gonna bitch at me a lot for this, but we did agree to let me handle this. He pulled away and gazed into the black clouds pouring down on Ichigo's sorrow. The king is going to hate me for doing this, but no one being this kind of journey on a happy note. He looked back down at his future wielder and saw a face locked in despair. This happened because you were weak, he stated, cold and harsh to the young boy. Powerless. How can you protect anyone when you can't even protect yourself? The world began to flood. Ichigo was slipping deeper and deeper into his sorrow. Mom, Mom, no, Ichigo said as the memories returned. Those visions were that of a monster that was devouring people, and its latest victim was his mother. How couldn't he recognize his own mother? Now she was gone because of him. Mom, he was talking through his tears, mixing in the continuous downpour. Mom, I'm sorry. Please don't leave me. He could barely choke out the words. Please don't die. He wailed out before crying. Sanketsu watched the crying child in front of him. In a way, he was disgusted with his wielder, soft, weak, vulnerable, but he knew in time he would be a force to fear, a force to reckon, a being of great power. Now was the time to plant the seeds for that warrior, time to set Ichigo on that path. She's not dying, he said, loud and firm enough that it reached Ichigo right into the young boy's core. The rain eased up considerably, but there was still quite the downpour. Not yet, anyway. I said she was gone, taken from you. With that, the rain got weaker and weaker, and Sanketsu say a light of hope returned in his master's eyes. She can be brought back, but what are you going to do? He asked the child. Ichigo looked at the pale man in confusion. How are you going to stop this from happening again? He clarified. Are you going to stay that weakling that cries every time he loses? Or are you going to stand up and fight for what you want? A deep, clear voice echoed behind the boy. He turned to see an old man with a shadowed beard and tattered cloak standing behind him. This was the time. There would be no going back. Ichigo finally developed a thing that was missing for so long: will, determination, resolve. The two halves watched the charge as he whispered the words that they were looking for. He just needed one more push. Speak up. Are you going to fight or hide? Are you going to stand up or fall down? Run and you will die. Hesitate and you will die. The road ahead is clear. They spoke in unison. Now choose. Ichigo brought his head up, set in a deep scowl, a focus and resolution before crying out, I will become strong. When he yelled that, the force of his cry broke the clouds apart and cleared away every drop of rain. The sun returned, shining stronger than either spirit had ever felt. It was more than happiness, it was determination. The two powers smirked, looking down at the boy. Now he will push himself to become the strongest he could ever be. That's the spirit, Ichigo. The pale blade said as he gave his master a pat on his shoulder. Never forget this feeling. This will push you to become stronger, strong enough to protect everything precious to you. The motivation will be your greatest asset, the darker sword told him. The time is coming for you to wake up, he said as he felt the world outside shifting. Just remember, ask your parents these questions, the hollow said, counting off his fingers. What's a Shinigami? What's a Quincy? What's a hollow? And what am I? Because you have more potential than all three. And don't forget to demand training. The world around Ichigo began to glow brighter and brighter as Ichigo felt himself leaving his world. Wait, he cried out. Oji-san, Oni-san, what are your names? The two spirits smirked and spoke, but no words came out. Before much longer, Ichigo was gone from his inner world. With Ishin, before Grand Fisher's attack, he sat on that couch, a cooling cup of coffee in his grasp. As he waited for his wife and son to return, he had started a small habit of play fighting with his son ever since Ichigo started doing karate. Never too serious, never too strong. Also praising his little warrior for his reasons to become stronger. Ichigo was surprisingly calm for a member of the Shiba clan, but the moment his child was born, he knew two things. One, he was going to be an embarrassing dad to every girl his son brings, and two, that his son was going to be a very powerful individual. His only aim with his son was to make sure he grew up a good man. If Ichigo ended up becoming a Shinigami or Quincy, he would do everything to support that boy, to protect him, especially from creepy scientists that are more threatening than they look. Come on, Ishin. The man across from him whined. Aren't you the least bit curious about that? What your boy can be? Kisuke Urahara, a more brilliant man, doesn't exist. Banished under false charges against him by a scheming madman, he contents himself with that candy shop and secret catering to the spiritual beings that can find his services. He had saved Masaki's life from hollowification after she got infected when they first met, and he explained that the same hollow now resided in their son. Ichigo's lineage was a kind of many could only dream of. All three primary spiritual kinds all residing in one body. Hitsuki was beyond curious to study and analyze such a being, but had enough respect for Ishin and his family to keep to their boundaries. So he tried to get their permission from Ishin in order to proceed. He does not intend to harm. He does not intend harm, just curiosity, and above all, preparation. Ichigo was currently a huge unknown, and he does not like unknowns. If anything happened, he wanted to be ready. Over 900 countermeasures were in place for the boy, which was still too few in his opinion. A bright flash of light shined through the house suddenly, shocking the two men. It didn't take long for them to notice the two Reitsu seemed to completely disappear, but only one mattered to Ishin, Masaki. He realized as the light began to disappear. Urahara and Ishin scrambled out the door and began to make their way to the mother and child. The second they got out the door, Urahara grabbed the former clan head and began to use his shunpo to accelerate their progress. It was a situation like these that made Ishin curse the Kido that was used to suppress the hollow at the expense of his own powers. Before their final leap, they heard a loud voice cry out, Sangetsu! This actually gave them pause. In the briefest of instances, they felt a near overwhelming power. They finished their jumps to nothing more than an unconscious mother laying protectively over her dear child. Ichigo, Masaki! The former captain cried out, his companion following closely behind. After a quick examination of the two, he was slightly relieved to find that both were still alive. This is bad, Ishin, Urahara exclaimed. Masaki had been completely drained of her Ritsu. If we don't get some back into her, she'll die. Can we use yours? No, we need Quincy Reishi. We have to get her to Ishida. And there was no argument, not even a single line of speech as the two former captains rushed to Karakura Hospital, the workplace of the last pure-blooded Quincy family in the city. Karakura Hospital. The room was filled with various people, the kind that takes notice to an event like this. A disturbance in the air unlike any felt before. Three people occupying hospital beds, asleep and unmoving. Two women, two mothers, two impure Quincy hooked to silver canisters, leaking a glowing blue liquid down into their veins. One with hair like a glowing midday sun, while the other had hair as dark as night. Masaki Kurosaki and Kana Katagiri, the wife of the man supplying the reishi IVs. With them were two white-haired men, a father and son, Ryukin and Soken Ishida, in the white suit and the other in robes. A dark-skinned woman with dark purple hair and golden cat-like eyes in black spandex and an orange shirt. A more tanned man with a braided ponytail and a thick mustache wearing an apron and opaque glasses. And finally, the duo that brought them all together. All right, Tessai, this should do it. Urahara said to his burly assistant from the store and old friend, a mix of medical science and restorative kiddo. The two Quincy's were in no more danger of dying. To the ecstatic relief of both husbands, they were still in comas, but they would eventually recover in time. It's good we acted in time, boss, the large man said as they fished up the final touches. Masaki was indeed in critical condition. His Majesty either deeply craved her power, or was disgusted with the thought of a Quincy that was infected with a hollow, mused Soken, a rare angered scowl laying off laying on his normally kindly featured face. He himself did not choose to put much stock in that old tale, choosing to be a proactive force of coexistence between the surviving Quincy and the Shinigami. He wholeheartedly supported the death gods when they massacred his own kind. Any atrocity committed as a hollow could be forgiven as those are being who have lost themselves, and Quincy destroyed them from existence with no remorse, which threatened that balance of the world. This cleansing was utter foolishness, and he cursed the Quincy blood that binds him to that accursed parasite Bach, the king of the Quincy. This is just great. The dark-skinned woman groaned. And things were bad enough with whatever Eisen is scheming. Now Juhabach is returning as well. This could throw all the world into turmoil. Maybe, but not yet, Ruichi. Urahara placated his old friend and former captain. Soken did tell us the prophecy of his return. The sealed king of the Quincy over 900 years. He shall recover his heartbeat. Over 90 years he shall recover his intellect. Over 9 years he shall recover his power, and over 9 days he shall recover the world. Spoke a voice. Exactly. We still have a few years to prepare for him, while still getting ready for Aizen. Urahara then noticed that not one of the adults said anything. They all turned to the now awakened Ichigo, who spoke the king's hymn foretelling the return of Bach. Ichigo, what did you hear that? The boy's father asked him, more serious than he had ever been with his boy. How long had he been awake? Before Ishin got any answers, his son gave his own questions. Dad, what's the hollows? What are hollows? The question from the little boy surprised everyone in the room. Well, Ichigo, hollows are. What are Shinigami? He asked again, throwing Ishin off again. Which do you? What are Quincy's? One at a time, Ichigo. Dad, what am I? Ishin froze at the last one. He immediately saw his sleeping wife's side and embraced his son, securely, protectively, lovingly. You're my son, he told his child, rubbing his back to soothe him. There is nothing that anyone can do to change that. He gave his son another squeeze before pulling back and looking him in the eye. Now, where did you hear those words? From these two guys in my inner world, the child said, confirming Urahara's suspicion of the boy being in his world. This old guy also told me to recite that thing I said when I woke up, said it was important. At that moment, Ichigo looked around the room and saw everyone. Who are they? They took the time to make introductions and proceeded with explanations. Hollows were empty beings lost to despair and hate that devour other souls and beings with great amount of spiritual energy. Shinigami were guides to the afterlives and guardians of the dead, purifying hollows and delivering lost souls to the rest. Quincy's were humans that could manipulate Reishi to completely destroy hollows. Because they threatened the balance, they were practically wiped out, leaving only so many to live in peace. So why should I have more potential than all of them? Urahara decided it was his turn now. Because Ichigo, you're a mix of all three, he told the child. Truly a miracle of grand coincidence. Your mother is a Quincy, a rather powerful one at that was bitten and infected with hollow reishi. Then a Shinigami saved her life by using his powers to seal that hollow away. Care to guess who that Shinigami was? The shopkeeper asked the boy. It took Ichigo just a scant few seconds to recognize the answer. Dad, you're Shinigami. Ishin smiled down to his son. Was Ichigo. I retired to become your dad, he said, ruffling his boy's hair. Then Ichigo said something that surprised everyone. I want to become strong, Dad, he declared. I want to learn all I can do, all the power I can use. I want to be able to protect Mommy and Karin and Yuzu. He got that same determined look in his eyes when he declared his desire for strength to his powers. Ishin recognized that look, and he knew that he would cave. Luckily, he wasn't alone. Then, if you don't mind, you can begin this weekend with my grandson to study the Quincy arts, the kindly old man said with a smile, taking on his burden while his son got his own feeling back together, whether to continue the Quincy ways or turn his back on it completely. I can teach the boy Kido, as I said. He might make the spells even stronger. Hey, Yuruichi interjected. No way he can just learn spells and long range. He's got to learn how to fight up close and personal. She got in front of the small child and pointed down at him with a dismally feral grin. Got that? You call me sensei or Ni-sama because I'm teaching you how to fight? Ichigo was excited by the dark-skinned woman's enthusiasm, but was also a little scared. Okay, he stuttered while clinging to his father. Yuruichi Ni-chan. Yuruichi just stared at the little kid and felt a pain to her existence. Cuteness. So, while Ichigo gets over his new trauma, who teaches him swordplay? Urahara asked Ishin. It was difficult to say who was the better warrior of the two when it came to Sanjutsu. When Ichigo gets a Sanpakto, we'll test him and see, Ishin said. He looked down at his smiling son and knew that Ichigo just decided to give up on normal childhood. No, more like it was taken from him. This was going to be a difficult road for Ichigo. He might never have normal friends. I hope you two are going to be ready when he grows up. You may not stand a chance. Ichigo's training began soon after that. End of chapter 2.